Okay, hello everyone. My name is Kevin. I'm the training coordinator with the Association of State Floodplain Managers, and I'd like to welcome you to our training today. We're going to be talking about building and sustaining relationships and networks. So before we get into the topic, though, some of you may be familiar, but I do have a few administrative items I like to just kind of set the table for everybody on. So number one, kind of webinar participation. As you can see, we've got a pretty big group today. So we're going to be limited to kind of typing out our questions and comments. So if you have those questions, if you have those comments about anything you see today, try to send those to the Q&A area of the webinar software here. I can draw your attention to the bottom features in Zoom here, and there's a chat area. There's also a separate Q&A. So we'd like to keep the questions that kind of you all maybe want us to address. Keep those in the Q&A because they can tend to get buried in the chat. So once again, please refrain from using the chat for questions. Um, Next thing I just want to mention is with regard to certificates of attendance, credits, things like that. So this webinar is eligible for CECs. For those national level CFMs, we're going to be issuing you rather credit automatically. We'll post that to your file. It'll take us about a week to do that. In the meantime, we'll also be generating certificates of attendance for those of you that join and earn those CECs and that certificate. So we'll email that to you directly to your inbox. It'll take us about a week to turn that around as well. But when you get that certificate of attendance, your credit will also be in your file there. So um, without any further ado, I want to turn it over to Jenna Moran. Jenna's our Flood Science Center portfolio director at ASFPM. So she's going to tell us a little bit more about the topic, the speakers, and what we all intend to discuss today. So Jenna, take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. Really excited to be here with this group of presenters and all the participants on the call today. We wanted to start with a little background on sort of context for how this webinar came about. It is part of a training program that we have at ASFPM in partnership with the National Association of Wetland Managers and the Environmental Protection Agency. It's looking to aid states, territories, local communities, and tribal nations in integrating their Clean Water Act programs with their natural hazard mitigation programs. So we're bringing together for these trainings local and state water resources related managers and emergency managers to discuss how to better integrate these planning and project implementation efforts to achieve co-benefits. The goal is to build cross-governmental relationships and awareness of what is going on in these different departments, different agencies, and at various levels of government, local, state, federal, regional planning organizations in terms of hazard mitigation and water resource protection planning and program development. We are aiming to hold one workshop a year focusing on this topic. We had one planned for last month in Florida with the Southeast region, but unfortunately, because of the hurricane season this year, we've delayed that event to 2026. So if you're in the Southeast region, that registration is still open. That event has not passed. But as you can see here on the screen, our next event is now going to be September of 2025 in Denver. And if you want to register for that event, we'll put the link in the chat. And it's here on the screen. And the cohorts that will be invited to that event are the ones in blue and purple. So the way that this webinar in particular came about is the cohorts that have participated in previous trainings. We meet with them regularly, and this topic of sort of how do you continue discussions with groups that you have at workshops or in those sort of one-off conversations or planning efforts where you meet regularly to create a plan, but then those meetings stop, and how do you continue the conversation? So to that end, we have our webinar today. We're focusing on two stakeholder groups in New York State, the Wayne County Shoreline Committee and the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network. And our speakers today will share how these groups started, how they've grown, the lessons they've learned as they've sort of iterated as groups along the way, and what it has taken and what it takes to keep stakeholder engagement in the group lively and active. Our three speakers today are Mary Osterman. Mary is the Great Lakes Coastal Community Development Specialist for New York Sea Grant. She identifies and responds to priority issues of decision makers in the New York Great Lakes region using a community-driven needs assessment survey approach. Mary assists local leaders in land use planning, watershed protection, sustainable renewable energy discussions, and assisting communities in their efforts in preparing for hazards, such as the impacts of climate change and coastal storms. Our second speaker today is Jess Coonan. She is the Hudson Estuary Resilience Specialist with New York Sea Grant, located in Kingston, New York. Jessica's work in estuary and resilience is focused on watershed and land use planning and policy in the face of climate change and extreme weather. She addresses issues such as climate change, sea level rise, impacts on wetlands, shorelands, communities, public lands, as well as adaptive river and shoreline planning. And lastly, Emily Vale is the executive director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. She's been in that position since 2019. Previous to that, she served for 8 years as the watershed outreach specialist for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Hudson River Estuary Program in collaboration with the New York State Water Resources Institute at Cornell University. And her work has supported community-based watershed groups, municipalities, and other partners throughout the Hudson River Valley region to improve water quality. Her research has focused primarily on green infrastructure, urban streams, and the intersections of art and community engagement. Today, we are going to start with Mary, so I'm passing it on over to you, Mary, to talk about the work ongoing in Wayne County through the Shoreline Committee.
Thanks, Jenna. Okay, let me see. There we go. Let me just share my screen. Can you guys see my opening slide? Perfect. Thanks. So thanks, Jenna. So as Jenna mentioned, I'm here to talk a little bit about what we're calling the Wayne County Shoreline Steering Committee. We are a group that is very early in our establishment. And so it's nice that we're going first as I talk about this, and you can learn more about a more established group once Jess and Emily take over. So before we get started into the nitty-gritty, let me. Why are you not going?
If you click on your slide deck to focus your cursor, it might.
There we go. Okay, so for those of you not familiar with Wayne County, you can see the state of New York here. And that purplish star is where Wayne County is. So you can see it's in the southeastern, kind of central eastern portion of Lake Ontario. This is a map of the county, and you can see that this box here with the red, these are the waterfront communities in Wayne County that are along Lake Ontario. There are 6 of them, and you can also see that we have got 5. One of them is very small, but 5 embayments. The one in the center, which is Great Sodus Bay, is the largest embayment on the south shore of Lake Ontario. Our embayment communities are super important to us as well, which I'll get into in a little bit. So just to give you a little idea about Wayne County, we do not have any major cities in the county at all. I share this because as far as technical assistance and capacity at the local government level, it's really very lacking. So you can see that the communities themselves are quite small, and also the economic situation in the region is not that great. So we have quite a bit of disparity when you look at some of the home ownership right along the coastline, and then some of our more inland communities. We are very
Mary, I just
Yeah.
want to call the attention to some of the conversation in the chat
Okay.
because some folks are able to see your slides, but some folks are not. And they asked an organizer to mention that.
They're working.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we good? So we're good?
Yes.
Okay. And thanks, Emily, because I can't see the chat right now. Thanks. Okay, so we're very ag focused. We are the second largest apple producer in the country. We are also very water focused. We depend a lot on our rec and tourism season to keep the county afloat. And then also we have a lot of single family homes along the shorefront, some seasonal waterfront cottages still, but many of those have turned into year-round residencies. And we also are seeing an influx of solar energy, and some of this is converting some of our previous agricultural land into solar farms. So to jump into, why did this group start? So I'll talk a little bit about some of the climate factors that come into play. So in the Great Lakes, we don't have tidally influenced water bodies. What we have is lake levels or water levels that are really dictated by the upper parts of the watershed. So all of the other Great Lakes feed into Lake Ontario. And so we have inflows from the upper Great Lakes, tributaries, and precipitation. And the way that the water gets out is either through evaporation or it flows out through a dam into the St. Lawrence River and then into the Atlantic Ocean. And so Lake Ontario is also a man-regulated lake, meaning the dam that flows from Lake Ontario into the St. Lawrence, there is some degree of ability to regulate the water flow going out, which means at times there can be ways to maintain water at a higher level in the lake than what is naturally occurring. But when we have extreme events, there really is no management plan or regulation plan for the dam that can really address the high or extreme low water levels. And so if you look at these pictures on this slide, we had catastrophic flooding in 2017 and then again in 2019. And when these kinds of floods happen, they last for months. So this started in April and it ended in about September, October, when people could actually re-enter some of their homes. And so the picture on the top right, that is a four-way intersection that is all road. And so in one of the communities, we had to have industrial sized pumps pumping 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for about 6 weeks. So we had first floor inundation, a lot of erosion. So the embayment areas are very low lying, but then we also have some bluff areas. And so we saw a lot of this bluff sloughing as well. You can see more of these pictures. We had a lot of attention from National Guard and a lot of sandbagging efforts. And you can see the industrial pumps in the bottom, in the middle. And so it really changed the culture within these communities. And so people were not able to access their homes. A lot of the typical vacation areas, restaurants, recreational areas were kind of isolated, even though they were many of them were still able to be used. They were very isolated because people were seeing this on the news and thought we should not be going there. So again, I talked a little bit about how we are the last of the Great Lakes, and all of this water flows into Lake Ontario and then out through, you can see Messina in the top right, that's where the dam is. But these different colors on this slide, these are the watersheds. And so all of this land is draining into the Great Lakes and ultimately through Lake Ontario. And this just demonstrates the watershed and the profile elevation wise. So in the beginning, how we got together was in after 2017, we had the first flood, and a colleague, Jamie Burchard, who is formerly at the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council, she and I got together and did a public engagement strategy with the community that has the lowest elevation on Lake Ontario, that being Sodas Point, to really look at identifying vulnerabilities, and what kind of assets they have, how vulnerable those were to this event, and then how those things could be improved to identify some action strategies for implementation in the future. In addition, we developed at Sea Grant a Coastal Resilience Index, which is a self-assessment guide that communities can do to look at their vulnerabilities and how their community can withstand those. Looking at different weather events. So flooding is one of them, but then we also have tornadoes and blizzards and other types of events. Jess Coonan, who is going to be speaking in a little bit, she assisted with the development of the Lake Ontario Inundation Web Mapper that was able to give both community leaders and residents the ability to look at parcel level flood risk at prescribed water levels. So this was groundbreaking that this could actually be done at the parcel level at the time. So one of the things that happened then after that was a bunch of funding became available through the then governor, Cuomo. So it was called the Lake Ontario Resiliency and Economic Development Initiative. So the acronym is READY. And what this meant for Wayne County was a total of a little over $41 million of funding that came in to the county to implement resilient shorelines. A lot of this was it was very emergency driven. And so looking back, I suspect that some of the design is a little grayer or a little more hard than what many people would probably like. Many of the projects do integrate a more natural development, but many of the projects are the implementation of flood walls and riprap and things like that. So again, this is just the Wayne County piece, but this also covered all of New York's Lake Ontario. So it did end up being like a $300 million project. From there, New York State Department of State launched a Coastal Lakeshore Economy and Resilience Initiative. The acronym for that is CLEAR. In a perfect world, it would have been great if we had had the ability to do CLEAR before READY rolled out to identify some more of these strategic opportunities to improve resilience. But this group, through Department of State, there were 4 or 5 different regions across Lake Ontario that were involved in these comprehensive coastal resilience planning efforts. And so what happened then was the group that was convened as the steering committee for the Wayne County Clear Planning Initiative then wanted to continue to meet and talk about these coastal resilience projects. And the timing of this was also very interesting because we had a pandemic right after the floods, and that is also when the Clear Planning Initiative rolled out. And so at the beginning of the Clear Planning Initiative, everyone was still remote 100%. And then as that initiative continued, we were allowed to meet in person a little bit. And so it was interesting that the local group, the steering committee at the local level, was meeting in person and then remoting into the consultants and the Department of State staff who were elsewhere. And so a lot of really great conversations were happening pre and post Clear steering committee meetings. And so when that Clear steering effort ended, the local people were like, this would be really great if we could continue to meet and do things. And so that's how this group kind of started. And what we ended up doing was we took what we learned from the clear planning process and through the ready process, the assets that were identified and whatnot, and we continue to keep prioritizing those and packaging those into potential projects. And at that point in time, Jenna and David Hart reached out and said, "Hey, we have this cool project coming up in the Great Lakes. Would you guys be interested?" And because we had gone through some of the initial steps that they would be doing with some of the other communities, we were able to come up with something a little bit different for Wayne County, which was more of community profiles that would assist the members that are looking to identify funding and secure funding. It kind of gives them a lot of that stuff that's needed in grant proposals. That they don't have the ability to easily get. And also a lot of ability to showcase some case studies in the future. This is one of these groups that we all are involved because we all find benefit in it, and it's a lot of work to start it and keep it going, but in the long run, it makes everything that we're doing a little bit more efficiently. And so some of the things that we keep talking about and we're working on now is the continuation of strategic project implementation. So Jenna and David Hart's project really set us up well to then leverage additional funding, and also it was almost like an accident, but a great accident that that project also afforded the county's GIS department the ability to really enhance the public-facing GIS database and really push that forward to enhance a lot of the coastal data that they had. So that was awesome. And then also, like having these case studies is something that these people are always looking for, the people that I work with. And so it's one of the things that we're beginning to work on now, and that they really are interested in these opportunities that we're learning regionally and also across the country about case studies about how to do things with little resources and little time and effort. So learning from others. And then the other thing that is also bringing us back to the table, everyone, is that a lot is going on in New York. A lot is going on with the Great Lakes. And so there's a lot of conversation about the development of an overarching New York's Great Lakes Coastal Resilience Network. And so the plan was to pilot something in that mustard colored area. So the northern Lake Ontario, St. Lawrence River Hub, which we got some NOAA funding to do, but because of all the work that the Wayne County group had been doing, they are the red ones. It's kind of organically been happening there. So we kind of have a great opportunity to look at how this organic group was developed and is continuing to work. And we're going to be doing some focus groups across all of these areas where you see the circles to identify like what kind of work needs to be done and how can we develop some kind of network if it's needed at all to foster that kind of collaboration. So it's very possible that each one of these regions will have something a little bit customized and unique based on their needs and also the complements of the partners that are able to be at the table. So again, we are very new. I think we've been really working together. Jenna, you were our first project, and I think we started that in 23. Yeah, 23. So that is the end of my slides, and I think we're going to hold questions until the end, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And just a
So
reminder
thank
to
you.
yes, and thank you, Mary. Really, really exciting stuff happening in, well, all of New York, but the Great Lakes, and what you've got going on there with that network is pretty cool. And just a reminder to put any chats you have into the question and answer box. But now I'm going to pass it over to Jess and Emily to talk about sort of the relationship building and sustaining efforts that are just a few hours south of Wayne County in the Hudson River Valley.
Great, thank you, Jenna. Can you see my slides? Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. Mary, it was great to hear about the work up on Lake Ontario, and I think there are some definite parallels with what we're talking about today and some key differences as well. But yeah, just excited for this conversation. So hey everyone, I'm Jess Coonan with New York Sea Grant. I'm joined with my colleague Emily Vale. We'll do some longer introductions in a moment, but today we're going to talk about the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network. We'll start with kind of an introduction to what we are, why and how the network got started, and how it's grown in recent years. And then we'll end with some lessons learned. So now I'll bring you over to the kind of southeastern part of New York State, to the lovely Hudson Valley, which is kind of outlined there by the watershed in green on that map. We're a pretty water resource rich area of the state. We have over 200 direct tributaries right into the Hudson River estuary, which spans 153 miles from Albany down to New York Harbor. So we are connected to the ocean, 2 daily tides, and the watershed itself has some varied geography. We've got some high elevation mountainous areas. We've got lots of small cities, villages. They're often at the confluence of major tributaries and the Hudson River estuary. So some of the challenges we face with flood risk are increased storms are increasing in frequency and intensity across the watershed and the Northeast. We experience tropical storms and nor'easters. And in recent years, we've been having some really pretty frequent extreme rain events. So lots of rain falling over a small area in a really short amount of time. And then along the Hudson River, we're seeing increasing coastal flooding due to sea level rise. So sunny day flooding, storm surge when we have the larger storms. And then as with many places, we've got aging and undersized infrastructure and development in and around the floodplains that occurs. So the mission of the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network is to connect local governments who are committed to taking actionable steps to manage current and future flood risk. And so New York is a home rule state. So that means it's up to every individual municipality to take action and plan for this increasing flood risk. So that really does fall on our local governments, who are often small. They have limited capacity. A lot of population of these places are less than 10,000 people. Many are around 2,000, and there can be high turnover in these positions as well. So we recognize that this work really is advanced by dedicated individuals, our community champions. And so this network is really to bring those types of people together to support one another. So you can join the network as a member if you're an elected official, staff, or a volunteer for a village, town, city, or county. We also have a partner level that you can join the network if you're with a state agency, consulting firm, or a regional organization that's kind of working in this space. But the network really centers in municipalities. And today we have 40 members representing 26 municipalities, and we have 38 partners representing 30 partner organizations. So what we do is we bring people together, for these peer learning opportunities to talk about projects and strategies. So we do this, we try to have quarterly virtual meetings, presentations and with some discussion. And one of our favorite things to do is bring people together in person. We'll often tour a flood mitigation project and hear from the community about all the steps that went into planning that. We also, keep the network connected year round. We do monthly roundups of funding, training opportunities. And then also we just serve to kind of facilitate communication between our local governments and our regional partners. So the network is facilitated by myself and Emily today. I'll talk about the history in a moment here. But I work for New York Sea Grant. in the Hudson River estuary, and New York Sea Grant in general is well suited to this type of work because we work with our community members and our partners and try to help facilitate bringing people together. And I'm going to hand it over to Emily to give an introduction of her organization.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for having us present today. My name is Emily Vale. I'm the Executive Director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. We are a regional nonprofit based in Kingston, New York, and we work to unite and empower communities to protect our shared waters. So as a very small nonprofit ourselves, I think there's a lot of strengths that we bring in this collaboration with New York Sea Grant and taking advantage of the different types of partnership opportunities, funding opportunities that each of us can bring to the table. So you'll hear from me in the second half of the presentation. So back to Jess.
Thanks, Emily. So yeah, our roles are really to provide that staff time and to keep the lights on is what we like to say. So the network was started in response to some historic flood events back in 2011. We got Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee right after each other. Those brought devastating amounts of rain to the entire state, but really impacted a lot of communities in the watershed. And then the very next year we had Superstorm Sandy, which brought record levels of storm surge that really impacted our waterfront communities. So it was a big wake-up call for the region. And our local estuary program helped fund some vulnerability assessments for Catskill, Kingston, and Piermont, which are some waterfront communities that were the hardest hit. And so I see a little bit of a parallel between these studies, these sea level rise task force studies, and the Ready and Clear initiatives up in Lake Ontario. And so, those were heavy community engagement within each of those communities. But then in the following years, the facilitators had this idea of let's get together and talk about the strategies across communities. And they really found a lot of value in that. And that's what led to the formation of the network. So the network was officially formed in 2018. And it's really just for municipalities to get together and share and learn what they've been doing. And I should say too that our founding members were excited about this because they love to share what they've learned and help other people that are just getting started. So you can see a long list of partners there over the years. I won't read through all the names, but they've all played various roles. And Emily and I joined closer to 2022, 2021 time range. And we were lucky enough to work with Bennett Brooks from the Consensus Building Institute, who was an early facilitator of the network. And as we were, and he always instilled in us this importance of, building slowly, building trust. And he provided this quote today. So those early conversations were really important to help local leaders begin to understand what the challenges of sea level rise in this case, but each community hungered for something else, a connection with other municipalities facing these same threats. So by bringing the communities together throughout these different points in the history, that really created a space for people to share ideas, brainstorm new approaches, and sometimes just find that affirmation and validation in hearing from another person's story. So that's really what we're all about. So I'm going to hand it over now to Emily.
Great. Thanks so much, Jess. So over the process of sort of developing this network, we realized that we needed to really hone the network identity, sort out membership, start to sort out the structure. So we started with 3 or 4 municipalities that were early adopters, real leaders in planning for flooding, and slowly added more and more municipalities that were interested in joining. And we didn't have the systems and structures in place to grow too quickly. We really wanted to prioritize the strong relationship building, growing in line with our capacity to engage with those communities, and making sure we were scaling up sort of at the right pace to achieve and focus on that mission. So in 2022 into 2023, we undertook a strategic roadmap process to really unpack who our members are, how does our governance work? How does the network best serve our constituents, our local governments? So this process was facilitated by River Network. We had an extensive community engagement. We had lots of Post-its that look like the ones that you can see there. Next slide. And the outcome of all of these conversations, all of this feedback, was a 5-year strategic roadmap, which is a guiding document for the network. So this roadmap has defined members and partners, so our organizational structure. It defines a shared leadership structure with specific roles for Jess and myself as the operations committee, the leadership of the advisory committee, which includes members and partners, and also a working group model to have sets of people, both members and partners, get together, talk about specific topics, and start to produce some deliverables for the benefit of the whole network. The Flood Resilience Network began with that sea level rise planning process and it really had a focus on Hudson River flooding. We've now expanded it out to include the whole watershed, so flooding of any kind in any of the communities that are within our program area. And the strategic roadmap helped us, again, hone in on our programming goals and activities over the next 5 years. Next slide. Some of the lessons learned. So since 2023, we've been implementing the strategic roadmap, lots of lessons learned. Peer networks are valuable. This was something that we assumed, but it's really proven time and time again that we can move further, faster together. We can learn from each other and we can take advantage of the shared experience, expertise of all of the passionate folks who are working on these issues. The network provides an important space for showcasing successes, asking questions, and for municipalities to connect with each other. And we found that in-person and virtual programs fill different needs and abilities to participate. So some people are able to come to an in-person meeting, tour of flood resilience practices. Some people are volunteers who can Zoom into a meeting, but we're trying to have different opportunities for those connections and conversations so that people with different capacity, geographic distance, that they're still able to have those conversations in different ways. One of the things we're really mindful of too is different types of conversations. So through our programming, we have facilitated conversations where people are assigned to a small group and they may have a prompt, which is what you're seeing in this picture here from the city of Hudson. We also try to provide opportunities for more informal conversations over lunch, on these tours of flooding practices, and then also in these working groups on more specific topics. Next slide. We wanted to share some of the voices of our founding Flood Resilience Network members and leaders in their role on the advisory committee. So from Julie Noble from the city of Kingston, Julie says, "The incredible value that I see from the network is sharing all of the amazing things we've done, learning amazing things that other people have done. That's the value of the Flood Resilience Network to me." And Sylvia Welch from the village of Piermont says, "Working with the Flood Resilience Network has helped Piermont consolidate its ideas of what its next steps are because we're working with the other villages and towns and where they're at. Oh my gosh, Beacon's on this, but somebody else has not done this." So it helps us look at where we're at and what the potentials are. So having all of these different types of municipalities that are really varied in the types of projects they're working on, the types of experiences they've had, we can come together, and even real leaders in the field like Julia and Sylvia can learn from what other municipalities and vice versa. Next slide. Some other lessons learned: having paid coordination staff really helps maintain the systems and structures that are needed for this collaboration. So Jess and I receive modest funding to cover our time as facilitators and running operations. And the communities, the participants really appreciate that we are able to keep those lights on so they can really focus their time on the program specific conversations, the issues that are most pertinent to them. Having stability of contacts builds stronger relationships. This has been really important to us. Many of our founders are still active. We have opportunities to really build over time close relationships with many of these communities, and having Jess and myself in this co-facilitation role where we're here for the long run can really help with the sustainability of these conversations as well. We have a goal to move towards more formal cohorts for planning and support. So thinking again of the whole network scale, but also these opportunities for maybe 4 or 5 municipalities at a time to connect on more detailed planning processes or projects. So in 2025, we're piloting this approach by bringing together a cohort of municipalities to do a local law assessment to better understand how they might manage and work on flood resilience at a local scale. Next slide. And to keep people engaged, we've really focused on connectivity as a part of our mission. So how can we use our programming to connect people as the primary piece of this mission? Peer learning, sharing out case studies, understanding opportunities to build on others' experiences. There's a lot of information out there on flooding, and how can we use the network to really distill down some key opportunities, key experiences, and these processes that the municipalities are going through. We're planning to implement a new virtual onboarding cohort style for members, so new folks to the network can meet each other and start to learn what other new municipalities to the network are working on. And we're continuing to improve our feedback mechanisms so we can respond to local needs. So the conversations are only as good as the content and the people who are coming to them. So we want to make sure that our programming is as relevant to our constituents as possible to really meet those local needs. Next slide. We're really excited about the direction of the Flood Resilience Network. It's been almost a decade since the learning group was formed with the original sea level rise task forces. And so we have a really strong foundation that we're building from. The advisory committee is active and engaged. Our members and partners are having rich discussions. We're sharing resources and ideas. The network is growing, and our next steps are clear thanks to the strategic roadmap and the consensus process that we've built around implementing those next steps. Next slide. So that's it from us, and we've got some links here if you'd like to learn more about the Flood Resilience Network, take a look at our strategic roadmap, or learn more about our respective organizations. So thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. It's so great to hear and I loved how, Jessica, you tied sort of the beginnings of the Hudson or the Flood Resilience Network, Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network, into sort of how the clear planning and ready processes happened as well. So really cool to hear sort of how you can grow from those beginnings of a planning effort and sort of taking advantage of the disaster funding to grow these conversations. Before we sort of dig into the questions that you guys had, as some of you might have seen, we put in the chat to start, we wanted to put some questions back to the group real quick about how you stay engaged in conversations and the benefits you see. So if you just want to, if we'll just take, 2-3 minutes, if you guys want to put into the chat sort of how you stay engaged in conversations as we get the questions ready for the presenters. Okay, well, first question for the presenters. Mary, we had a couple questions for you that are not necessarily particular to the building and sustaining relationships, but about the control of Lake Ontario water levels, sort of what type, if you know what type of dam is around Lake Ontario and sort of those Lake Ontario regulations that control those.
Yeah, so it's a super complicated situation. So it's a binational group, the International Joint Commission. I can send information that you can send, Jenna, but there's the International Joint Commission commissioners, and then there is a board of control, which also is binational that represents different interests related in water level management. There is a whole plan about different criteria that has to be met and different times of the year when the water is at different water levels. If it hits a trigger, then the board can vote whether or not they deviate from the current outflow level and things like that. It's super, super complicated. But I can send links.
Great, thanks, Mary.
Yep.
Then we had a question. I think it probably can pertain to both of your groups. They were asking how many members sit on the committee. So I assume that could by both the Shoreline Committee and the advisory board for the Flood Resilience Network.
So for the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network, see if I get this right. We have 4 municipal seats, so 4 municipal representatives, 2 partner organizations, and then 1 representative from the Hudson River Estuary Program. So that kind of connection to the state. And so we did that intentionally as kind of a 2-to-1 ratio of community voices to the partner voices. And I think it's worked out pretty well. Yeah, Emily, if you have anything to add, go for it.
Okay.
So,
oh.
do you have an answer too?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you, Mary.
That's all. And so we don't officially have seats yet. We are in the process right now. A small group of us are in the process of developing kind of a framework to give the group some more structure. Currently, I coordinate the group with assistance from one of the municipal leaders. And so we're at the point now where we're looking at some existing models of collaborative groups around resilience and things like that, and pulling out pieces that we really like about those existing groups, and then customizing that for the needs locally. And then the plan is, take it out to the larger group. So right now, the larger group consists of department chairs for each county department, regional planning entities, each municipality, both supervisor, mayor level, but then also code enforcement or building because of the floodplain administrators. A couple of special interest groups that are related to the region. And so right now it's kind of a whoever wants to be involved in the conversations is involved. So we have an email list right now for our regular meetings. It's probably about 30-ish people. And so over the course of the next year, we hope to come up with some kind of structure. But we are currently recognized by the county as an official committee. We just don't have, we just can't get in trouble for anything because we don't have any rules yet.
Love it, Mary. Okay, another question. Any advice or experience for overcoming contentious relationships and anti-restoration attitudes within local communities when beginning to build coalitions and networks?
You want me to take a stab, guys? Okay. So water level regulation in the Great Lakes is a very contentious topic. And the way that those conversations have been held at the binational level in the past, kind of pinned the different interest groups against each other. And so one of the things that I do as a Sea Grant person is really try to pull everyone together. It's kind of what Jess and I do, like we're the glue people is how I describe it. And giving people the space to feel heard in a safe space, and relaying to them that you are hearing them. There's many things that are out of the control of the people in the group, but sometimes a lot of the things that are making a topic contentious really comes down to the people feel away, but they're not able to be heard and feel that they've been heard. And so making that safe space. And then the other thing is, you always seem to have a couple of people that tend to be naysayers and very vocal about that. And so oftentimes I'll invite them to be on a project committee or a steering committee, so that their wishes can be included in the project as well. And again, a lot of that from my experience is that they oftentimes feel like they have not been heard and that their opinions are just not being integrated into whatever the effort is.
Go ahead, Emily. I saw you
Okay.
come off mute.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm Jess and I were not around for the beginning of the network, but we've talked with several of the people who were. And because of our network, it's really the people self-select to join the network. So we're less involved with some of those more contentious conversations, but we know they're happening at the local level, and our municipal partners are certainly dealing with these. So seconding what Mary said about lots of space to listen, I think especially the early sea level rise task forces really benefited from a very skilled facilitation team that created lots of opportunities for public feedback, listening, responding, growing trust together. It's part of that slow process. And one of the things that we heard recently and reflecting back on that is that having a solid track record at the local level of but implementing in a way that's very considerate towards local needs and bringing people along has built trust over time as well. So some of the more contentious early conversations have sorted themselves out as the local leaders have implemented projects that are benefiting the community. And I think the Flood Resilience Network can play a role by supporting those people through those processes as well. So, there's this local aspect along with the regional aspect.
Thanks, Emily. And that actually perfectly segues into another question, which asked, has the Flood Resilience Network applied for state or federal grants to support the implementation of flood mitigation projects, especially nature-based approaches?
So we have not applied for any implementation projects. That's not really our role. So there's interest and talk of being a space that communities can come together, maybe neighboring communities to use the network as a way to, just come together and maybe go for some of those projects on their own. But at this point, we're not in a position to apply for implementation funds.
And we do send out announcements of those funds to the network, so the municipalities themselves who are better suited to doing capital types of projects like that can take advantage of those opportunities. We've focused more on our funding on some of those coordinated planning opportunities to tee up the municipalities for those types of applications.
Great. And could you talk a bit more about the programming that the network does offer and sort of if you've absorbed participation level change depending on sort of the topics of the programming? That'd be interesting to hear about.
Go ahead, Emily.
Our team. Sure. So we have sort of our core programming, 1 to 2 in-person meetings with a site visit field trip component a year. We try to do that in different geographies. We try to do that of different types of flood plans, projects. And so we get great turnout depending on people's interest in some of those maybe geographic locations or learning from some of those communities. We also host these quarterly lunch and learn meetings with a feature presentation. That content will draw certain types of people. And I think that a lot of this is word of mouth as well. So as we're moving about our other aspects of our jobs that are not the Flood Resilience Network, we get to talk to lots of people and find folks that might really benefit from joining the network. We have municipalities telling their neighboring municipalities to join. And so it's a really nice snowball effect of how different people come to the network.
Yeah, and I'll add in terms of content, in the past year, we've focused a lot on kind of flood emergency communications from some of our members and like the systems they've come up with to communicate, with like residents and businesses that are most at risk during these events. And so that's been really helpful for our members to learn from each other around that. And I'll just give an example of, our field trips. We did 2 field trips in 2023. They were in more urban areas, but we focused on green infrastructure projects. And it was really eye-opening, I think, for a lot of communities to see what they accomplished. And, even the smaller communities, I think, can get a little you know, they feel like they don't have the capacity that a city has to go for those grants. But even people from the city have really, really good advice for them on certain little tricks that they can do. And so it's all about those connections for us.
Yep.
And I also just want to say thanks for all this great comments in the chat throughout this. I'm kind of quickly scanning them, and it's great to hear from everyone today.
And shout out to Sylvia Welch, who just chimed in the chat. Sylvia is one of the founding members of the Flood Resilience Network on the advisory committee, and she shared some of her experience working on applying for those types of projects as a grant writer in the Village of Piermont.
Awesome.
I can add to, so even though the steering committee in Wayne County is in infancy, I've been doing programming and training and technical support in the region since 2012. And so it is like the focus is always around water resources for me because I'm a Sea Grant person. And so there's always like a group of people that tends to be the same people, but depending on the aspect of it, we do have the ability to pull in some new people based on the topic, but then also the nature of local government, because that's my target audience is local government. There's a lot of turnover. And so it's finding those champions is so important. And so even just in a small area like Wayne County, we have 6 municipalities. I tend to always in that county, I tend to have one champion in that county every cycle. And so that may change, but there's always one person that's water related because, again, the technical capacity that they have is so limited that they cannot all be focused on the water stuff. So there tends to be someone that's really strong in that, and maybe another person that's strong in ag, and another person that's strong in economic development. And so they rely on each other, which is also a nice thing because it lends itself to the need for a collaborative network anyway. And so I feel like we're kind of just like building off of what they already do anyway, but they just don't have that capacity to coordinate it on themselves and keep the momentum and keep everybody like all the pieces in play.
Yep. Thank you for chiming in, Mary, because I was gonna call on you to try and tease that out, and you just went right in and did it. But there are a couple smaller, more sort of specific questions left from the chat. So for Emily and Jess, you mentioned that sort of you were able to get funds to offset the network's management. If you could give a little bit more information on where those came from and sort of how that came to be.
Yeah, so the process started with funding from the Hudson River Estuary Program, which is a program of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They funded those initial sea level rise task forces, and then they, through a grant program, each partner every 2 years got a grant to continue. So that was part of what was so challenging about the early iteration of the network, was that the point person for the network was changing and the grant was going to different partners. And so we've been lucky enough to have some stable funding from the New York State Water Resources Institute and the Hudson River Estuary Program to cover operations time. So that covers our coordination time. And then we are able to go for grants for sort of above and beyond programming, above our normal core programs and meeting facilitation. And Jess has also been able to use some funding from New York Sea Grant in support of her time as well.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well, we are at time, but a really, really big round of applause and thank you to Mary, Emily, and Jess for joining us. Such great insights, and really appreciate all the great work going on in New York State and you joining us today to share it. And thank you to everybody in the chat. As Jess said, really, really great comments. We're hoping that we can download that chat and save it and share those as well as part of the follow-up. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great day. Happy holidays.
Thank you.